All right, welcome to episode 45 of the CROM Updates, and I'm joined this morning with Rom Parsons and his prose story for CROM and the Ziggurat of Blood. Good morning,
Yeah.
Rom. How are you doing?
I am great. How about you?
Fantastic. Hey, man, every morning's a great morning when you can get up and talk about sword and sorceries,
Yeah,
blood and
absolutely.
barbarians, and babes.
Yes.
So I want to come right out of the gate swinging. Who are your influences when it comes to writing prose fiction, pulpy, paperback, sword and sorcery, or the like?
Yeah. Obviously, you know, Robert Howard's work um, with Conan and Sword and Sorcery is, a huge one. Um, but I really like Lynn Carter.
Oh, me too. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
I just
Wow.
love uh, I just love the fun that he has with it. Um,
Oh, my. Oh, boy.
yeah, and
I'm
Gardner
reading.
Fox too. Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I'm reading halfway through King of Elfland's Daughter,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and it is amazing. I can literally geek out on the point of saying, like, the chapters, it's a very fast read if you really want to be technical about it. But
Yeah.
just like you said, you read through like a Lynn Carter or a Lord Dunsany, and you got to just go back and read it again because you want to get a little bit more fun out of it, but even just the sort of just esoterics in it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the you know I love Robert Howard and his Conan work that really just blew my mind the first time I read it. Um, but when I first read Thongor and the Wizard of Lemuria,
yeah,
um, to me that took it up a notch because to me it was like, wow, this is we're having a lot of fun now. We're really there's no pretension. There's
nope,
no
nope,
we are doing the good stuff. So um,
yep.
I would say that's a major influence on what I do. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of this is something I put together, and as well as reading The King of Elfland's Daughter, I went through archives.org and grabbed the first, I think this is the 21, 22 of the original Sword and Sorcery stories.
Oh yeah.
Um, and it's all just basically until you get to, was it Nitzan Dialis, it's all Robert E. Howard and Clark Ashton Smith, who I would put Clark Ashton Smith in the same house as Lord Dunsany and
Right.
Lynn Carter. You know, talk about the purplest of prose.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you right now, I was absolutely 100% Conan the Barbarian movie and Conan the Barbarian or comics and Savage Sword comics. So never got to these pulp stories until way later in life.
Right.
And man, it is
Yeah.
so obvious of why they started turning these things into comics.
Yes.
So this is just an absolute, just it's a buffet, a feast, if you will.
Yeah.
It's just great stuff. And like you said, I think the biggest misunderstanding uh, in, let's say, the literature world that I've come across with people when I talk about like pulp, not even like sword and sorcery, but like pulp is, and I paraphrase what their responses are because I think they get a little high and mighty, but oh, those stories are a little too much fun.
Yeah. Yeah. How could it
They're
be too
not
much fun?
serious. They're not serious enough.
Yeah.
They don't take characters to the depths and the emotional. You're
Yeah.
like, really? Like
Yeah.
fighting a cosmic horror Cthulhian beast living in the shadows while you're being chased by zombie cannibals is
Yeah.
not serious enough a threat for you.
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
So you have been engaging me through Instagram and YouTube as well. Are you also on the YouTube?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Good. So you also supported that's the copy of David Molina's Virgin cover for the CROM
Yep.
collected, 140 pages, just a little bit of advertising for 140 pages of black and white sword and sorcery goodness.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, and I know David will be just as ecstatic for you being one of those who supported CROM through purchasing his cover version. Can I ask, out of all of us, what was it about David's work that was attracting to you the most?
Yeah. All the covers were awesome, but this,
Yeah.
if I can get it on the thing, what sort of blew me away was the sign. It's supposed to
Yes.
be, sword and sorcery, but you've got this sort of modern sign,
Yep.
and just this sign alone, you know,
That's
it
awesome.
opens up all kinds of story
Yes.
ideas in my head. It's
Yes.
like no dragon.
Yes.
Why are there no dragons? Are there exits? In this world, are there some kind of crazy vehicles? So yeah, that just looking at this sign sort of made my head go. I'm thinking
Yep.
about this. So
When I first started engaging guest artists, David was the first one on my list, and all of them. And I'm going to also pose this as a question, as well as a statement of fact. All of them pretty early on, when we were getting to know each other through CROM as a creative platform, they would ask, uh, Kurt, does CROM take place in like a prehistory Earth, or is it not on Earth? And how do you feel about aliens? I was like, all of the above. I also
yeah,
like the ambiguity of like it being counter Earth, and a
yeah,
multiverse kind of Earth going in, leaning back into the Gardner Fox stuff.
yeah,
But at the same time, no restrictions between science, sorcery, the whole thing. What's your feeling about the world Crom lives in for you inside your head?
Well, I got to start off by saying uh, it's kind of crazy because I'm a huge comic book fan. I'm a huge sword and sorcery fan. I love finding characters that are in the public domain,
Yeah.
um, and somehow, some way, the perfect character that was all three of those Crom I wasn't aware of until 3 or 4 months ago. So I don't know how that
Wow.
happened. But
Wow.
yeah. So when I first got this and read it and read through the original Gardner Fox stories, yeah, the thing that just boggled my mind was the limitless story potential. Right off the bat, you're not talking about Conan's world, which is
Yep.
10,000 BC or whatever. You're talking about something that's you can let your imagination go and anything can happen. Earth has two moons. There's ape
Yep.
men. There's giants. There's
Yep.
all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I guess in from my point of view, you know, when I'm thinking about crime, like you said, anything's on the table. He can
Yeah.
put
Anything
that stuff.
goes. And yeah, and that's as I'm getting on in life and really becoming more picky and choosy about what I want to work on as a creative person. Um, I really want to have fun up to the last minute of my life here on Earth,
Yes.
as well as being actively drawing and creating something that is super close to my heart. Now, Conan is super close to my heart, but at the same time, it's just such a hot potato of an IP and character to sort of deal with and kind of
Yeah.
squeeze yourself into, that when I got a hold of or came across and got a hold of the original copies of CROM the Barbarian, and really, like, I was a little disappointed in maybe not being as fleshed out, like literally, like, oh, there's only three issues, three
Yeah.
10
Yeah.
pages of this. Like, how could there not be more? Like, 1950 in comics, like, that's a really hot spot and everything. But
Yeah.
history plays on. But I did initially started having these feelings like, wow, I could try to like write myself into the Conan canon, whether it's accepted or not, of the guy who helped usher in the background material for the god Crom swears to.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and I remember being on some forums, sword and sorcery forums on Facebook, and there was only one or two people. A guy by the name of Steve Dilks. Do you know who
Yeah.
Steve Dilks
Oh
is?
yeah. Oh yeah. Big
So
Steve Dilks fan.
we
Yeah.
had a conversation. He took offline. It was like, "What do you mean, like, the background on Crom the god? Like, how are you going to do this?" And I did say, "Well, I want to do it through a comic book." And he's like, "Oh, okay." He's like, and I think, not I've my response to hardcore pulp reading sword and sorcery and hardcore comic book sword and sorcery is very much that there's almost like a division where one is sort of not interested in the other's canon. So
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
find myself not getting a lot of response. But then when I started releasing my own stuff and then interacting with other people who were into comic books and sword and sorcery, they were like, "Oh, hell yeah, that makes sense." And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, this is really kind of odd. But what is your take on that connection of what Fox and John Junta put together in Crom the Barbarian, and this whole god Crom, Conan the Barbarian swears to?
Yeah, I like in this book how it's sort of the different versions of the emerging Crom, the transforming Crom.
Right.
I sort of like I like that, and right off the bat, in Gardner Fox's first story, he talks about how Crom, this is the morning of this is Earth's morning, this is the very beginning, and so
Yes.
this is
Yes.
almost the time before myth and legend, um,
Yes.
so the idea that this is sort of the cosmic Crom takes place in sort of this cosmic soup that eventually transforms into the gods that Conan worships. Yeah, I think that's I love that idea. I think that's awesome. And you mentioned something interesting. You're talking about you're on some forums and you didn't really get response. Yeah, I think there's sort of a division
Oh, there is.
of uh, the people that are sword and sorcery. Even within the sword and sorcery world, there's sort of a division. I think
Yes.
there's the people that are mainly prose. They see it mainly as prose, and and then I think there's people like me, and I'm certainly assuming someone like yourself that
Yes.
I almost feel like sword and sorcery is more of a comic. Um, I feel comics is the best media
Medium.
for sword and sorcery. That's
Oh
me. I know
boy,
there's a
what
lot
a
of people that
can of
disagree with
worms.
that, but
Oh boy, oh boy. I wouldn't completely agree with you, only because, um, do you know the story Dura, the uncursed, the accursed? It's a
I
Clifford
don't know
Ball
that one.
sword and sorcery short. Um, so real short. These are three. They are documented as the first three sword and sorcery stories to really lean into what Howard started. So there was a very like, oh, pastiche, oh, you know, uh,
Yeah,
uh, uh, cull, CROM Barbarians, this world kind of thing. Um, the first story, Dur the Curse, Duar. I've been trying to. Well, I'm in somewhat of a dilemma in whether I should bring it into like a CROM type of situation. But the story is very. Um, it's very word heavy in description, but not very action heavy. So there's
Oh,
like four. It's like four little pieces, and it doesn't really like translate immediately to a comic book paneling. Now, this is what I'm having as a frustration. So I don't want to say that somebody else couldn't come around and grab Clifford Ball's stuff or some other people's work and not be able to make the translation. But I think there's a kind of a desire of depth, like trying to create both a stronger character or maybe more like a place. Like I think that was the thing that Clifford
yeah.
Ball was trying to deal with
Okay.
was
Yeah.
like, what is a sword and sorcery place? Like what's her name for CL Moore for Jory of Jor-El.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that same thing. Like there's not a lot of action, but you're
Yeah.
plotted through this place where, is it the Black Kiss? I think is the
Yeah.
first story for
Black
her.
Gods. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and all of a sudden you're down in this weird place, out, that was she was led through a crack in her dungeon wall of her citadel. You know what I mean? And then she's
Yeah.
kissing this black idol to
Yeah.
get a curse put on. Like how do you put that into a comic book? I think is
Yeah.
is an extreme challenge because comics. Just right there with your David Molina cover, it is really about the driving action. But I also will backspin and say that's where the comic books can lack. Is the comic books can be just all action, no depth of world,
Yeah.
character, and story.
Yeah. Yeah. And I certainly love sword and sorcery prose
No.
as well. But for me, yeah, I kind of like. I think comics is where it's at for me.
Oh, yeah, me too. I'm not I'm a very good writer. So let's talk without spoiling. And I
Okay.
will be very honest with you. I did not read like the last 3 pages on
Okay.
purpose because I have a tendency to talk a little too much and too long
Okay.
in a stream of conscious, and that I was afraid I would let something slip out. Of
Oh, okay.
course, I could edit this later, but I didn't want to do that. So I'll be later today finish reading, especially after having this conversation with you. But
Okay. Yeah.
please, Rom, share what CROM and the Ziggurat of Blood is all about, and where you're coming and where you're going with it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, probably I mean, one of the big inspirations would be People of the Black Circle.
Oh,
Conan story, People of the Black Circle. That's my favorite Conan story. Um, and to me, that story has everything. It's got action. It's got sorcery. It's got intrigue.
yep.
And a little bit of romance, and so I think Ziggurat of Blood has. I tried to throw everything into it. Um, so yeah, but it starts off with CROM has been sent by Tanit. There are um, bandits that are sort of like shutting down all the caravans, so it's preventing necessities from getting into Ophir. So
Right.
CROM has to hunt down these bandits, and when he does, he has to go to the jungles to hunt down these bandits, and with some of his men. And when he does, he finds this sarcophagus,
Yeah.
and it's covered in jewels, and the face is very alien, and the men want to strip it for jewels, but CROM says no. It's so valuable. Let's take it back to Ophir and give it to the queen. And um, so they do that, but it gives everybody a very a very bad feeling. And even though it's covered in jewels and it's beautiful, it's giving everybody a very icky vibe. So they decide to they speak with a priestess of Besh, who in my imagination is the main priestess or the main goddess of Ophir.
Okay.
So they decide to take this sort of evil feeling thing and put it in the main temple of the goddess, sort of to negate its negative influence. And when they're taking it to the temple, all these um, cultists who up to now have been unknown that are hiding under the city of Ophir sort of come out and steal the sarcophagus because um, it's a holy relic for them, and then they're going to use it to bring back a demon.
Yeah.
So CROM has to go get it back, or they discover, now that they have discovered these cultists, CROM has to go smash them, and he there's a lot of intrigue I'm leaving out because I don't want to spoil anything.
Yes.
But
Good.
it
Good.
it
Good.
involves there are the cultists have spies in the palace, and the palace has spies within the cultists. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of that going on too. And so uh, Crom and Crom has to go under the multitude of levels under Ophir to sort of smash this cult. And their headquarters is the Ziggurat of Blood, big giant ziggurat, the color of blood underneath the city, circled by lizard dragons and molten lava moats and all kinds of stuff. So then, yeah, it big time adventures and action sequences happen from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yo, the word intrigue is definitely at the top of the list. Is how I would influence somebody to get a hold of it. In other words, if you want a sword and sorcery yarn, Crom centric, and you enjoy intrigue, that's how I would sell it. But the question that I really have in reading it is, and I'm going on that this is a first draft, or at least
Yeah,
something
yeah,
that you're willing to take some feedback,
sure.
and if you will, or something like that. But who or what is the most important aspect of your story, Rom?
Uh, I guess who or what?
Yeah, who or what?
Yeah, I guess it's funny because there's so many moving parts.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Um, but I tried to make Crom the focus.
sure.
Um, but we there is a character in there. I don't want to spoil it. There is a character in there that is an original character that has lived in my head for a long time,
Okay.
um, and he gets to make his first appearance in this story. So don't want to spoil anything because there's a lot going
Good,
on with that
good.
character.
All
And
right.
but yeah, um, he also is a big focus.
Now, my question is framed around just having started reading. I got through the first Cull stories by Robert E. Howard, and I was thoroughly surprised, definitely with the Shadow Kingdom, that Cull is not really the focus of the
Yeah,
story. It's really this snake-headed cult,
yeah,
which is of course, a super ancient alien type bunch of people who were conquered by the Atlanteans, and then in order for them to stay alive, they have to, take on human forms and then be a part of um, uh, Atlantean culture, and of course their goal is to replace the current king, who is Kull.
Sure.
Now that blew my mind.
Yeah.
Like, once again, because when we make something being so excited, and I do it, I do it as well when I sit down and start writing a CROM story or something as I call CROM centric and adjacent, is, CROM has to be, right, the central point. Well, after reading Shadow Kingdom, I'm like, that is super cool, because now not only do I want to know more about Kull, but I have been given like a physical place to move in and around, because now
Yeah.
Brugel the Spear Slayer is now his best guy, his
Yeah.
right hand man. All these little things have been set up. They're not living in a super technology Atlantis. They're living in a barbarian landscape between the where Brugel comes from, and these it's just really things. So once again, we have to, though, draw back to your story, the word of intrigue. And, you could even say, maybe that's the who or what
Yeah.
is what purpose is the story to, let's say, throw Crom off into his, another layer and direction,
Yeah.
if you will. But the intrigue itself is, how do you feel about that? Like, or how would you see that, like, in reworking the story, or just,
Yeah.
buffering it up?
You're saying maybe in a future draft, play that up more.
In some element or way,
Yeah.
because the only thing I feel, and Rom, I'm only doing this based on very limited knowledge in writing
Yeah.
and reading pulp. So,
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
just
Oh
just
yeah.
going back to the whole, I spent most of my time reading comics.
This was written like within two. I got like this white hot idea, so I wrote this in 2 weeks. So
and
yeah,
it
any
feels,
feedback
and
is
it's, you could release it. I mean, I think you could release it as is. I think you would have what I'm experiencing, the sort of element where people would go, oh, you know what? If Rom jacked up the intrigue part and made that the focus, and of course, Crumb is running as one of those characters, as well as Tantit and the other players in there,
yeah.
the cultists, and because some people might even say, like, oh, you got to deal with, like, the mystery of the sarcophagus,
Yeah.
but that could be it's the intrigue and the sarcophagus.
Okay. Yeah.
But these are, like I said, these are just
Yeah.
my just wanting to dig into your space, your sandbox, as it will.
Sure.
But so the other question I have now is, what are the plans for Crom and the Ziggurat of Blood? Have you published before? I don't know. Like, even just in a payable, downloadable, PDF, or maybe even print.
Yeah. I have a collection of stories on Kindle called Cosmic
Ooh,
Adventure Stories.
okay.
Wrote that several years ago. So those are like three 10,000 word stories that are sci-fi sort of, or space fantasy
Okay.
focused. And then I have an original character named Alani, the swordswoman, who's a sword and sorcery character. Um, her first sort of very short adventure, you can get for free on my Instagram, which is brutal blade of Rom Parsons. You can links on those on my Instagram, and you can read those. They're free. So that's my. But so yeah, that's pretty much the extent of it. As far as the Ziggurat of Blood, um, I would love for it to be a comic. I think
Right.
it's very comic booky. Um, if anybody in the Crommunity, was interested in, um, working with me on making it a comic, I would love that. But if not, I'm probably would think about, putting it together with some other stories and putting it, on Kindle or something as
Releasing
a
a collection.
yeah.
So with my calling for collaboration, I've had multiple interactions so far, and I also just want to remind people as they're coming in and watching this, maybe months and years later, and the community is even stronger than the 5th of October 2024, as I'm talking to the Rom Parsons. That it's not only the engaging of me in collaboration, it is what you're also putting out there is there are a lot of people out there that are without writers. And it's something too that my cohort and I for Turbo Pit Fighter, which is another podcast that I work on at Comic Book as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we Jake Jacobs is the primary writing source and penciler, and then of course the anchor and marketer and co-author to Turbo Pit Fighter. But we often end up in conversation with artists who, I hate to use the word complaint, but it's very hard to find. It's not only good writers, but a writer who is very understanding of the needs for the penciler in
Yeah.
order for them to perform their duty. So the thing I really do want to keep connection with you, Rom, is helping you get possibly some type of visual connection.
Yeah. That'd be
You
great.
turned me on to James Anthony, by the way, um,
Yeah.
when I was going through. Did you commission James Anthony? And just
I
so
did.
everybody,
I did.
just
He did one piece of art for Alani, my original character, and then that
right.
evolved into we're working together on an Alani story. Um, he is the first big Alani story. We're working together on. He is providing. It's like 17 or 18 um, illustrations of that
Illustrations.
story. It's not
Oh
a comic.
wow! Oh
Um,
wow!
it'll be prose, but all the big moments are going to be punctuated by a big, awesome piece of his art.
Oh
And
wow!
he's doing a cover for it, which is awesome. And it's been amazing working with him um, because the ideas he comes up with. He came up with an idea for the part of the ending of the story that was a million times better than what I had thought of, and so 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 yeah, we're working on that right now. So we're going back and forth. At some point when that's all finished and put together, I'm going to get that printed, and we'll get that out
How many
there. So
pages
yeah,
total? How many pages total, Rom, would that
I'm not
package be?
sure. It's about 12,000 words. The story is about 12,000 words, and then we're going to have the
Illustrations.
so I don't know how many that will turn out to be, plus the illustrations, and then we're going to have a map, and
Oh
um,
my!
so yeah, it's going to be. I'm really excited about it.
Oh, wow, well,
So
I am too as well. So like I said, I saw, and this is sort of the way
yeah,
I also
he's
see
just incredible.
collaboration.
He's incredible.
I see the collaboration efforts working forward because I'm always looking for pencil artists. I like drawing, don't get me wrong, but for me, drawing is a separate headspace.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have my marketing and business and just the regular collaborations, often going on, putting CROM together and everything. So I get about 3 hours a day to be able to sit down and do something creatively. And for me, inking is just such a joy. It
Yeah.
just things. So I'm always interested in finding somebody's pencils, if you will. So I saw his illustrations through your Instagram, which I also have to say, I've been saying this a lot. Instagram has been doing me right. In other words, it's based on me liking things and doing all the things I guess I'm supposed to do. I'm getting more and more suggestions. Like you're one of the top 5 posts I'll see first in the morning when I hit the Instagram feed.
Awesome.
But I immediately saw that, jumped to James's Instagram, which is Shelob's Layer of Drawing, which both, by the way, Rom and James's links to their Instagrams will be down in the description. And just immediately messaged him saying, hey, could you send me a drawing and let me ink it as I'm working live, as I have been doing. And man, got back to me within like 15 minutes. Now he is in England, so he is like 5 hours ahead of us. But yeah, and so this is part 2 of about probably 4 or 5 stages that I'm working on this on
Yeah,
my
I know he was
Instagram.
way excited to see you inking his stuff. So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
And he's also giving us, this is Lyra, the story of the usurper queen on his planet. These are 2 centuries that are guarding the outer borders and stuff. So the idea of collaboration, I'm doing my best to weaken maybe preconceived ideas, because the thing about writers, and I'm excluding you from this statement because I don't know you well enough, but the predominance, even Jake, by the way, too, is included in this statement. They really, if they don't have, even if they do have some drawing capabilities, their eyes are bigger than their piece of paper and pencil.
Yeah.
so what happens is look, I got this story. Look at all this great stuff. You could draw this. You could, okay. But there's, especially with comic books, and this also goes back to me penciling comic books. Half of penciling a comic book is laying it out.
Yeah.
And the other half is reconfiguring your pencils to work better as from the original layouts. So there is a lot of we pencilers or artists working with writers would call extra work, and God bless those artists that are OCD, like some artists I know, which will be left unnamed in this video, where it's hard for them to become satisfied. So they end up reworking, and then maybe even getting themselves a little, maybe upset or something to that extent. So one of the pressures I'm sort of hoping to alleviate in collaborating through CROM, the Barbarian, or the Crommunity, as I'm calling it, is I've got a platform which is CROM Anthology, which is issue 1 is now currently in the works. And right after this, I have another episode with David Molina, and I'll even tease a little bit here. This is page 3 of what David and I are working on, and it's called The Last Dryad, which is a CROM world-centric story.
Love it.
But the idea was, this is from an old 1960s pulp story, which was only 2 pages long. So we had that as the writer. It was called The Last Druid by Joseph Kellum. And so we bounced back and forth on top of that. Now he's primarily just going on the pencils because we've already hammered out predominantly. Now he's able to tweak out the compositional layouts as he sees fit. And then I can, of course, make a last, hey, could you maybe do this a little less or maybe a little bit more like that? But once those pencils be done, I will then be going into inking. Because I'm a huge proponent of not doing it all yourself in anything creative nowadays. It's a undertoning of my platform for CROM and Turbo Pit Fighter is I find people are already way over worked in their real
Yeah.
world, and
Yeah.
when they enter their own creative space, it breaks me down into little pieces of sadness to think people are now stressed that their writing's not as good. They don't know how they're going to promote it. They don't know
Yeah.
this. They don't know that. Where really for that 1 hour they should just be drawing
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
inking or writing. And so I am the only collaboration that Rom and I have right now is exactly what Rom and I are doing, which is having a CROM update. So this is a huge thing. So the signal will go out. Like I said, there'll be links to the Instagram, right? Is the best way to get a hold of you, Rom?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect.
And I'll
So,
say,
go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. I'm just going to say, if you're an artist, you will not have a problem with me. I will probably pretty much say, here's the story. You're the artist. You
That's
figure
kind. That's
you
kind.
you do you do you. And if you have a question for me, I'm here for a question. But yeah, I am not one of those that's going to say I want it
The,
drawn this way. It's got to look like this. It's
right.
got
One of
that
the
wouldn't be me.
one of the suggestions now. This is 25 pages long,
Yeah,
and
it's big. Yeah, it's big. Yeah,
so once again, it's the same sense of digestion.
yeah.
Like it's like, oh, you want me to
You
draw a
couldn't do that
25
in 22
page
pages. Yeah,
story? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So now
couldn't
you're
do it.
trying to get somebody on the hook for 6 years of their lives penciling.
Right. Yeah.
This is I'm playing the devil's advocate,
Yeah.
Crom, because I've been in this world. A long time, and I love working with people, by the way. So anything harsh that might sound is only out of a place of
Sure.
love
Yeah. And
and wanting
yeah,
to
I
grow
realize
wanting to
that's
grow it.
yeah.
But like I said, there's a microcosm world for very creative people, and when I refer to very creative people, it's the ones that are actively pursuing their art, whatever it
Yeah.
is. That there's this world of what's called doubt, and what it does is it seeps in and it makes you obsessive sometimes on things that you might not be doing as well than the rest of the world or however they're doing it. But once again,
Yeah.
it goes back to then being overwhelmed. So
Yeah.
I would suggest this: if there was any takeaway today from our update, and we would do a follow update, is I would break as best you can this story down into 5-page minis, like five
Yeah.
page sections. And
Yeah.
if you know what I mean, like if
Yeah.
because I know that right out of the gate, it's CROM in the doing the whole bandits thing,
Yeah.
and then they come across the sarcophagus. That to me, right there, having read that, Rom, that's almost 10 pages right there. To be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but if you,
Yeah.
as the writer, can say, "Hey, proposed pencil or artist or so on and so forth. Here's the first 5 comic book pages, I think." You know what I mean? And then we could sit down and kind of work on that. Because the worst case scenario, for the 45 minutes that we spend together on an update, I've got a pen and piece of paper. I might be able to even give you some little like layouts
Yeah.
that could also be submitted to the package that then can get in the hands of people who would go, oh, 5 pages? Crown the Barbarians? Heck,
No problem.
I
Yeah.
can do that,
Yeah.
and then move from there. But like I said, the
Sure.
suggestion is it's always, I find writers to also be very, very generous. And I feel that from you. But even with that generosity of like, do what you want, I get concerned for people being overwhelmed,
Yeah.
creative people being
Yeah.
overwhelmed by, really wanting to please you, the writer, of course, and then be the audience who we don't even know who it is at this. It's
Yeah.
like there's just this world that ends up becoming cloudy and murky and dark, and then you don't get your best out of artists.
Yeah.
So
Well, good. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. And yeah, I certainly understand that it's a big story. You couldn't do that in 22 pages or probably even
it's graphic
42.
novel.
Yeah.
It's a graphic
So,
novel. I see it
uh,
somewhere around 40 something pages, to be honest
yeah.
with you. And I'm just
And
reading it. I haven't even finished reading it, and it's 25 pages, 8.5 by 11 prose.
yeah.
But the way, and once again, this is totally like bumping up your signal as a writer, is it's very rich. So, like I said, once
Thank you.
again, this first page and maybe a half. Yeah, almost 2 pages. Man, what a rich 5 pages of comics it would make.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a
I
lot
mean,
going on.
right. That's how I did the math. Was 25 times 2 is,
Yeah.
excuse me, two is 5. Then 5 times 20. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
going to be up in the 40s and 50s by the time you get to a place, because you also don't want to skimp out. As a
Yeah.
writer, feeding us the juicy bits that you are feeding us.
But yeah, I think you're gonna like the ending. There's
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a
it's
nice evening because I'll finish reading. I'll finish reading, and then I'll go back to reading the Skull of Moons.
okay. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome.
But we're here. We're here at the end. We like to keep these bite size. But
Sure.
I'm going to give you, the final say. If there's anything that you want to kind of pose as question or just throw out there, please do. And as I said, anything link wise, I'll put in the description.
But yeah, definitely would like to work with any artists that want to work on CROM stories, and I actually have a few other CROM stories that are rattling around in my head. Um,
Nice.
and a Lala story that would be a good um, that would also be either a prose or a comic too. So yeah, and then I've got Alani and the Citadel of Swords, which is what James Anthony and I are working on. Which look for that in the next few months. There's no rush on it, so we're just kind of taking our time. But
Nice.
so yeah, I've got that work going too. So yeah.
Well, I always say this. This is not the last interview that we'll be holding. I am super excited for everything that you've already given in the way of support of the community, and the story you have just here with all the other. As a writer and just a very enthusiastic person, it's going to be great. It's going to be great having another conversation with you about where you're at, and of course where the CROM project's at, and and having a good time. Like I said, this is
Absolutely.
a low to no stress, and we take our time. And if we miss marks, we miss marks. We just keep moving
Yep.
along because
Yeah.
even myself is not making a living off of this, but it's
Right.
enriching me. It's enriching me and making me feel, good and less stress. And that's a thing. And, if people don't know me already by now, I love talking to other people about comics, CROM, Conan, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So, and being creative too, by the way. So I can't thank you enough once again, Rom, for taking the time and sitting with me and us getting to know each other. And like I said, I am looking forward to the next time we hang out.
Absolutely. I can't wait either.
All right. You take care
Thanks
of
for having
yourself.
me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And hold tight for a little after show.
Okay. Will do.